Good morning, and welcome again to our Lenten Devotional series. It's where we're looking at the really cultivating the image of Christ in our lives. And today in the scripture from Matthew 24, which is verses 15 through 28, we find in this chapter in Matthew scenes and phrases and imagery that we might not know exactly what Matthew is talking about out of context. It's a little bit like a time I went to Egypt, and we were visiting churches there. But there was a day that we took some time out and visited the Karnak temple just outside of Luxor. And there were these amazing reliefs carved into the stone. And but honestly, as you looked at them, you had no idea what they were about. And you just needed someone to point out, okay, well, that's the Pharaoh, that's one of their gods, and because of this color, we know that it's talking about that thing. And it helped to have a little bit more background to get a sense of what was going on. And earlier in this chapter, in chapter 24, Matthew is really, in the second verse, shares the prophecy of Jesus about how the temple is going to be destroyed. And sure enough, in 70 AD, this is what happens. The Romans ransack Jerusalem and they level the temple. And so in a sense, the Gentiles entering that Holy of Holies, that sacred place, is an abomination. But that's what they do, and they destroy. There's this desolation that comes. And this is what Jesus prophesies. It's what Matthew is pointing to. Then there are other things in this text, things about people running to the mountains, things about the coming of the Son of Man. What's all that? A little before the destruction of the temple, Eusebius tells us, who is a historian ancient historian, tells us about how the Christians, just prior to this, fled to the mountains of Pella, and so literally fulfill that part of what Jesus is prophesying about. But then there's this thing of the coming of the Son of Man. What's that all about? And it's certainly pointing to Jesus. It's the way that Jesus describes himself at various points in the Gospels. But it's been understood in different ways. N.T. Wright, who we've been following along in these devotions, speaks to it as the fullness of Jesus is coming, and really his resurrection from the dead and his exaltation as he overcomes both sin and death on our behalf. Others have also understood it to be his second coming. So these are ways that we can understand what Matthew is speaking about in this chapter. But the whole picture here is one of a very turbulent time in the first century, certainly in this part of the world. And I think for us it carries questions of, well, how are we to be in turbulent times, in times when we aren't too sure about what's going to happen in the future, our futures, the future of our nation, or even our world. In these times of uncertainty, what do we do? And the message of Scripture is clear. It's stay close to Jesus, obey his word, and trust in him. Trust in him and do not fear. It's tempting to fear when we look at the different things that are going on around us. Scripture says to us that the perfect love casts out fear. It's so important that we draw close to God. Scripture says, draw close to me and I'll draw close to you. As we draw close to God, we get more and more of a sense of his perfect love for us, that the author of life would surrender his life for us. This is what happens. This is what we celebrate at Easter. And yet because of that is able to take it up again. And so he surrenders his life. He gives his life so completely for us. That is the fullness of God's love for us. And as we grow in understanding of that, we clearly see how one who created all that is and created us loves us so much that he doesn't want to let us go. And he has made a way for us to join him and be with him always. So whatever tribulation or trial you may be going through, Jesus himself said, in this world there is tribulation. I hope you know the overwhelming love of God for you, and that truly he is going to be with you in all things, even to the valley of the shadow of death and out the other side. It's who he is. He delights in you and wants to be with you always. Thanks be to God. Have a great day.